Grandfather Elias or the smell of pancakes or the sound of exuberant singing. Instead, it crept in through the slats of the heavy oak shutters in her grandfather's attic, carrying only the scent of cedar and old tired dust. Elara sat cross-legged on a moth-eaten rug, her fingers tracing the edge of a silver locket that hung around her neck. It was empty now. The photograph of her mother had been lost months ago, sliding out during the chaos of the funeral, to Caraftifis that looked out over an impossible horizon. Elara gasped, clutching the doorframe as she stared into the loom of years. The gravity here is a matter of opinion, not a law of nature. The voice was metallic, yet warm, possessing the rhythmic clicking of a well-oiled machine. Elara looked down to see a creature perched on a stack of floating gears just past the threshold. It was an owl, but not one of flesh and feather. Its body was crafted from polished brass and copper, with eyes made of ticking clock faces and wings that shimmered like iridescent oil on water. Your mother's final gift to you. Without it, the memory of her voice will fade from your mind forever, leaving only the silence of the void. We must go, Wilaver. He must go, Wiliver was needing Talaron. He reached a bridge made of woven silver threads. It swayed precariously in a wind that tasted of peppermint. Elara took a tentative step, the silver singing beneath her boots. Suddenly a cold wind with the snowflakes hummed a low melodic tune. Barnaby guided Elara with sharp, rhythmic hooting, warning her when the glass beneath her feet in. Why would someone steal a memory? Elara asked, her eyes darting toward the dark patches of shadow that seemed to cling to the underside of the islands. She felt a deep, a calm as they hummed the building Satan and spice, and pulled in knave to the ears as wailed. His was a speeding as sterned them becoming banes at the stale. They passed through the orchard of first smiles, where the trees bore fruit that tasted like sunlight and laughter. Elara found herself laughing for the first time in months, the sound echoing strangely in the thin, magical air. But the laughter was cut short when they reached the edge of the orchard and saw the descent in the Valley of Echoes. The valley was a deep, purple chasm where the air was thick with the sound of 1,000 overlapping voices. It was the place where the things people said in their sleep were stored. Barnaby landed on a jagged rock, his gears clicking nervously. We must be silent here, Elara. The echoes are hungry for new sounds. If they catch your voice, they will keep it, and you will be left a mute in a world of ghosts. Elara nodded, her face pale. She began the descent, climbing down a ladder of frozen lightning bolts that hummed with static. As he shot away, Thangby closeted and nodded. At the base of the obsidian tree, a figure crouched that seemed to be made of shifting smoke and tattered memories. This was the Shadow Weaver. He had no face, only void where features should be, and his hands were long, skeletal needles of... He was reaching for the violet lantern, his fingers twitching with anticipation. Stop your kindness to give, Elara cried, stepping forward onto the ashen sand. But mine, the goodbye is mine. You can't have it. She felt a surge of anger, a hot, bright flame that pushed back the cold of the valley. Beside her, Barnaby puffed out his Crassus, just wings glowing with a golden light. She is right, Weaver. The memory is the price of the love, and she is willing to pay it. The Weaver hissed, and the shadows around him rose up like a tidal wave. You think you are brave. You are a child clutching a broken toy. Let us see how much light you have. I remember. Stood her ground, her hand flying to the empty locket. She realized then that the locket wasn't just a container for a picture. It was a symbol of the space her mother had occupied in her life. She closed her eyes and reached into her mind, not for the image of her mother's face, but for the feeling of her hand in hers, the warmth of her hug, the specific way she laughed at her own bad jokes. I'm ready to lose waves as your fingers. Go, Elara, get the lantern, the clockwork owl cried, his gears grinding with the effort of the struggle. Elara leaped onto the first branch of the obsidian tree. It was cold, biting into her palms like dry ice, but she didn't let go. She climbed higher, the echoes of the valley screaming in her ears, trying to distract her with voices of doubt and fear. You're not enough, the echoes whispered. You'll forget her anyway. Time heals nothing. She ignored them, her avis fold as about way of a deciduous tree. It was cold, biting into her palms like dry ice, but she didn't let go as some of the impala need changers. That Shadow Weaver recoiled, shrieking in a voice that sounded like shattering glass. You cannot hold on to it, it will break you, he cried, his form flickering and becoming translucent. I might never meet a show. Oh,
sky can actually meet into the scream channel. The ast shatter and blast.
The moment her fingers touched the lantern, shrieks, Barnaby's whirring, the wind's howl, all of it vanished. Elara found herself standing in a place of pure, soft light. It wasn't the loom, and it wasn't the attic. It was a space that felt like the moment between waking and dreaming. In front of her stood her mother, just as Elara remembered, wearing her favorite green cardigan with the mismatched buttons. She wasn't a ghost or a shadow. She was simply there. Elara felt a sob break from her throat, and she ran into her mother's arms, but couldn't let him take it. "I couldn't forget. I'm so scared I'm going to forget you, Mom. The world is so big and you're not in it anymore." Her mother smiled, a small sad movement of her lips. "I am in the loom, Elara. Then you let it go. I play stars, and the way you help your grandfather, and the way you carry your heart." "I'm not keeping it," Elara said clearly over the top of the obsidian tree, holding the lantern. Below her, the shadow weaver was a pathetic, shrinking thing, withered by the light she had brought back from the white space. Barnaby was perched on a lower branch, his brass feathers dented, but his clock eyes shining with pride. "What will you do, child?" the weaver asked, his voice now only a whisper. "Will you keep it? Will you stay here in the dark with your pretty light until you turn into a shadow like me?" He reached out a trembling hand, not in an attack but in a plea. He was a creature of hunger, and he was starving. But the fast-shell weaver gave a final mournful cry as the light passed through him. He didn't die. He simply unraveled, his dark form dissolving into the gray sand, which began to sprout tiny silver blades of grass. A valley was no longer a place of echoes and ash. "The loom is always here," Barnaby replied. His clock eyes seemed to move beneath Elara's feet, carrying her and Barnaby toward the threshold of the mundane world. The floating islands were vibrant now, the color saturated and deep. The air was filled with the music of the loom, a symphony of a billion memories all humming in harmony. You take a rare kind of to understand that love isn't about holding on. It's about letting the love change you. He landed on the edge of the dissolving door, looking back at the vast, magical land they were leaving behind. "Will I ever come back?" Elara asked, her hand on the doorframe. She felt a strange pull, a desire to stay in this world where magic was real and her mother's voice was a tangible thing. She looked at her empty locket, then at the horizon where the violet butterflies had disappeared into the great spindle. "The loom is always here," Barnaby replied, his clock eyes slowing down as they approached the time of the real world. "Every time you remember, you are here. Every time you dream, you walk these paths. But your life is on the other side of that door. Your grandfather is waiting, and there are birthdays to be celebrated in the dreamy inn." The glass path seemed to move beneath Elara's feet, carrying her and Barnaby toward the threshold of the mundane world. The floating islands were vibrant now, the color saturated and deep. The air was filled with the music of the loom beers, looking back at the vast landscape they were leaving behind. To reality and memories wills, which is our here of The midnight door was gone, replaced by the tattered velvet curtain. The iron key felt warm in her hand, then slowly cooled until it was just a piece of metal again. She stood in the silence of the house, but it didn't feel empty anymore. The shadows were just shadows, and the dust was just dust. She felt a lightness in her chest that she hadn't felt in a very long time. She talked down the narrow stairs, her boots stuck in. "Okay, girl. Now, blow out the candle. Make a wish for the future, not for the past." Elara closed her eyes. She didn't wish for her mother to come back. She didn't wish for the pain to go away. She wished for the strength to keep weaving her own story, one thread at a time. She talked about the shadow weaver and the way the silver grass had granted more than time. The iron key felt warm in her hand, then slowly cooled until it was just a piece of metal again. She stood in the silence of the house, but it didn't feel empty anymore.
The shadows were just shadows, and the dust was just dust. She felt a lightness in her chest that she hadn't felt in a very long time. She walked down the narrow stairs, her boots thumping on the wood. She found Grandfather Elias in the kitchen, sitting at the table, grandfather's hand. His time was rough and papery, but his grip was firm. I found out that saying goodbye doesn't mean forgetting. Shadows were just shadows.